Hello, welcome back to the State of Baker, where we have the conversations that polite society does not want us to have. Hopefully through structured conversation and debate, we can spread a little bit of knowledge and understanding about the world around us. As always, I encourage everyone to get involved in your local government and politics. Today, I want to talk to you about racism, and specifically racism in America. Now, despite what all you social justice warriors want to believe, racism is not restricted to America. In fact, there's a lot of other countries that are very racist. Japan, Germany, most of Europe, Scandinavia. There's a growing movement called the Nordic Resistance Movement has come to power. Well, not come to power, but they are growing in support, and they now actually have a standing within the Scandinavian governments. Pretty big deal, right? And a lot of this stems from uncontrolled migration brought on by policies of the European Union, NATO, World Trade Organization, and a bunch of others. So let's focus on America, right? Now, start off, racism. What is it? Most people automatically think, well, racism. All right. Well, anything the white man did. There's a little bit more to it than that, right? Per the Oxford Languages, racism is prejudice, discrimination, or antagonism directed against a person or people on the basis of their membership in a particular racial or ethnic group, typically one that is a minority or marginalized. Well, I'm pretty sure the Shia in Iraq would disagree with that definition a little bit, considering that they were the most populous people within Iraq. However, the Sunnis actually controlled the government under Saddam Hussein. Okay, so I feel like it's a pretty solid definition, right? Prejudice, discrimination, antagonism directed against a person or people based on their membership in a particular race or ethnic group, okay? Race or ethnic group, okay? So any law or policy that separates or differentiates between two people based off their race or ethnicity is inherently racist. Okay, so when you're looking at it, so the new trend right now is equity of opportunity. It's not equal opportunity where everybody just gets the same opportunity to go and do whatever it is that they want to do. It's equity of opportunity. Essentially, and Jordan Peterson talks about this a lot, essentially what they want is the same result for everybody based on race and ethnicity. Now, you're probably thinking, well, okay, words, but that policy is inherently racist because you are discriminating against people based on race and ethnicity and probably gender as well. And any category that you want to attach to it is discriminatory. The only way to get away from racism and discrimination is to get rid of race and any other qualifying factor, any box that you check on a job application. You just need to get rid of it. That's how you get rid of discrimination, by not seeing color, by not seeing race, by not seeing ethnicity, right? And to go through, again, back to America, while looking at the history of racism in America, I ran across a lady, a professor, Dr. Carol M Swain, right? She's a professor of political science and law at Vanderbilt University, and she wrote The Inconvenient Truth About the Democratic Party. Now, you can probably say, oh, my channel is dedicated to bashing the Democratic Party. I'm not. This is historically factual. Google it. Despite what your history books and what they're teaching you in schools these days, get on Google. Go read books that have been around a lot longer than 20 years. You're going to come to the same conclusions that Carol M. Swain did, as well as myself. And trust me, coming from a guy who got a history degree at East Carolina University, right? I was told that the Civil War was fought. I was told that it was not fought over slavery. I was told it was fought over states' rights that were more along the lines of trade, international politics, a bunch of stuff like that. If you go back and read the Articles of Secession written by the Confederate States that were run by Democrats, it specifically states in their Articles of Secession it was based on slavery. It was to preserve the slave-holding states. Now, some of you might be, okay, yeah, well, we knew that. All right, well, the part that I want to hone in on is the fact that in today's time, the Democratic Party is in control of the United States government. All right, they've got a loose majority in the House and they got a loose majority in the Senate, but they own the presidency, right? Well, if you're paying attention to Merrick Garland, he's now coming out and saying, we are going to, write new laws and increase persecution of, white supremacists. Well, they're painting conservatives as white supremacists because they don't specifically say who, but if you look along their guidelines, it leads you to the conclusion, and go and read it go read it for yourself. Go listen to him and how he talks, right? It leads you along the lines of pointing the federal government at the political opposition of the Democratic Party, right? Same thing the Nazis did prior to World War II. But you have to understand like historical context of it, right? So it's funny, right? Because if you go read the New York Times article that was published, I believe around January, February this year, it talks about the Democratic Party, the cabal that they essentially started to solidify the 2020 election, and how they used Antifa and BLM to pressure states into doing what they wanted, what this small group of people wanted to help. And it lays out all the Mark Zuckerberg donated millions of dollars to specific states that eventually had voter irregularities. It points at, Texas came out recently and they banned all outside the state donations for the purposes of elections because Mark Zuckerberg went down to Texas and dumped a couple $1 million in certain specific areas that they realized, okay, there's, some sketchy crap going on. The 2020 election in those areas, there was some sketchy stuff going on. And it was all linked back to Mark Zuckerberg's donations of millions of dollars. They're finding this everywhere, right? But you have to understand, and the reason why I'm saying this is because Merrick Garland is pointing everything into the direction of the political opposition of the Democratic Party, which is the Republicans, the conservatives, right? But you have to understand the history of this for this to make sense, because in that Times article, again, it talks about how they used Black Lives Matter, all right? The group of people that are supposed to be out there fighting for the racial injustices, the racial injustice that is systemic in American government, okay? They're burning down cities in their own states, but they are not the target of Merrick's domestic violent extremist policies. Neo-Nazis are. You haven't seen anything in the United States about neo-Nazis for at least 20 years, 30 years. But BLM burnt down cities all last summer. Okay. So getting back on topic here, right? So Democratic Party had been around for a while, right? They were the slave owners. They were the plantation owners. They controlled the South. Well, the Republican Party didn't come about until 1850s. I think it was 1850, or I'm sorry, I think it was around 1860 or 1861. Abraham Lincoln was the elected president of the United States of America, and the Republicans held a slim majority in Congress as well as they held the presidential seat. Well, they went through and they started limiting, they didn't abolish, they were trying to limit the progression of slavery through all the newly formed states such as Texas and California and anything west, because America was growing at the time. Well, the Confederate States came out and said, well, no, if you're limiting our ability to move slavery into these new territories, then eventually you're going to wipe slavery out, and we can't have that. So they seceded from the Union. We fought the Civil War. 500,000 men died. Predominantly white people died to free the slaves. 1862, a Republican, came out with the Emancipation Proclamation, and which was enacted January 1, 1863. Okay, so let's fast forward a little bit. Civil War ends, Robert E. Lee surrendered, slaves were freed. Well, before Abraham Lincoln could enact his policy to start introducing the freed slaves into the take part in the Union, he was assassinated by John Wilkes Booth, who was a Democrat. Well, at the time, presidents had the habit of asking their political rival during an election to be their vice president. So Abraham Lincoln had a Democratic vice president. But when Lincoln was assassinated by John Wilkes Booth, the VP stepped in and squashed all of the domestic policies that Lincoln had planned to enact, which would have brought the freed slaves into the fold of the Union. So from 1862 up until the Civil Rights Movement in 1960s, so about another 100 years, black people in America were oppressed. They were, Eventually, after Reconstruction, the Democrats moved back into the South and they took back over the leadership of the Southern states. And that's when you start seeing the KKK rise in the early 1900s. You start seeing the opposition to the civil rights movements. You start seeing black codes. You start seeing Jim Crow laws. Everything comes up, and it's all enacted by Democrats in the first half of the 1900s, right, up until the civil rights movement. But now, add another 60 years, so here we are, 2020, and they're trying to paint conservatives, Republicans, as the party of oppression, the party that wants to return to slavery. You're insane. Nobody's walking through the streets saying, "Hey, I got a plantation. Hey, you're black. Come work for me." No, that's not what they're doing. Now you're going to say, "Oh, well, there's other means like sharecropping." Yeah, we'll get into it. Hang on a second. All right. So typically, when you think of slavery, you also need to understand that when you're applying 2020 concepts, like hindsight's always 2020, right? But when you're in today's age of 2020, 2021, and you are applying our logic, our ideals, and what we know as right, what we know as the socially accepted norms to history, you have to understand that was a different time and place. Not justifying slavery. I'm just telling you, it doesn't make sense for you to be talking about something that happened almost 200 years ago, something that was squashed in the 1960s with the civil rights movement, and we're still continuing this throughout. Now, it's ignorant for me to say that racism doesn't exist. However, it's also ignorant for them to say that racism can only be conducted by white people because white people are inherently privileged and white people can't be discriminated against because we are inherently privileged. I think it's actually from a website out of a group from Canada, and I'll make a slide and I'll add it to this, right? So you understand exactly what I'm talking about. They had to create another word. They had to create anti-racism or reverse racism to describe any discrimination that would happen against a white person. Why can't we just use one word? Racism. Stop playing games with the English language and just accept the fact that racism doesn't matter who's doing it. If you, as a human being, as an individual, discriminate against another human being or individual or group of people by their race or ethnicity, you are being racist. Doesn't matter what color you are, you're just a racist. Get over it. So African American slaves, they came to America via the Triangle Trade during the early colonization of the Americas by the East India Trading Company, which was run by the British government. But you have to understand how African Americans came into slavery, right? Ancient tribes used to fight each other, and instead of fighting each other to kill each other, they wanted resources. And they knew that if they fought to kill people, then the most important resource, which was a human being, is essentially being wasted. So when a tribe fought another one, the losing tribe would essentially become the prisoners and the slaves of the victorious tribe, right? You see this all throughout the American Indians, the Aztecs, the ancient Indian cultures and civilizations. It's all over the place. Egypt had it, China had it, Assyria had it, Babylonia had it, the Roman Empire had it, Arab Islamic Caliphate had it, ancient American Indian tribes, right? It's throughout history. I'm not saying it's right. I'm just saying it's historical, and it's in more places than in America. And right now, if you go look at what China is doing to the Uyghurs, harvesting body organs and selling them online for money, that's pretty bad, bud. I think we need to start focusing our attentions elsewhere and not further dividing American people. So the Republican record, right? So the Dred Scott Supreme Court case, 7 Democrats voted to essentially conclude that slaves were property, and 2 Republicans voted against it. They were the only 2 Republicans on the Supreme Court at the time. All right, that was back in the 1850s. President Lincoln, first Republican president, Emancipation Proclamation. The 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment. Yeah, all because of Republicans. And this is the danger of erasing history, right? So they're talking about critical race theory, and some genius came out and said that critical race theory was a conspiracy theory. You're insane. You're high. Go look at all the school boards. Go look at all the parents that are raising Cain within the school boards. Go to YouTube. Just search, boards of education, angry moms, anything. Critical race theory. Google it. You will find where parents are coming out and speaking out against what their kids are being taught. They are shaming our kids. Teachers, like, who we trust with our children's lives and education and well-being, are essentially trying to brainwash our children to think that because they're white, they're horrible human beings. They're kids. They don't see color. They don't see race. You are teaching children to hate each other. That is insane. Stop. For the love of God, get it. And I think COVID, one good thing that I think came out of COVID-19 was this. It forced parents to take a more like detailed look at their kids' education, the kids' lives, right? And the schools, the dummies, they did online education, right? So the parents could literally sit there and watch their kids being taught. What do you think all this backlash has come from critical race theory? It's because now the parents who were working their butts off to provide for their families had to take time and stop and focus in on their kids because everybody was at home. And now that they understand what their kids are being taught, they're furious. And I don't blame them. It's only reasonable. That means that they love their children. You don't know how you prevent the next Hitler, the next Stalin, the next Mao Zedong, the next Kim Jong-un. How you prevent the next mass murdering crazy person is by loving your kids, taking an interest in their lives, and supporting them, and teaching them morals and the difference between right and wrong. I want to get into, Ben Carson did a hearing, and he was talking about the fact that Planned Parenthood predominantly targeted black communities in poor, impoverished cities. Look at any city that's run by a Democrat, it's a crap hole. Look at any state run by Democrats, it's a crap hole. Everybody's moving to southern Republican conservative run states. Why? Because equal opportunity is really a thing. They didn't have to make a law to enforce it. It's just a thing. You can go be who you want to be, work your job, do whatever you want to do. Hey, man, as long as you are a law-abiding citizen, no one's going to bother you. Look, the number one killer of black kids is other black people. It's like gun violence is insane. Yeah, it's majority of it's gang related. Look at Chicago. No one's talking about that, but they want to talk about like the Derek Chauvin trial. They're so quick to jump on a black person being killed by a cop. There's a lawsuit currently going on right now where a black cop was involved in the death of a black young man during an arrest, and I believe it was an NFL stadium came out and posted a banner, supporting this kid, the kid that died, who was a thug. Well, now this cop is suing the NFL because you're essentially stating that the cop was a bad person and killed the kid because he was black. Well, the cop was black. So the social justice crap is just crap. Like, people need to stop and think about, stop listening to the news, go find the information for yourself, understand what's going on in your communities, take responsibility for your actions, do what you're supposed to do, be a good contributing human being, member of society, and go from there, man. Like, stop believing the first like punchline that some politician or some damn news anchor says. Look into this information. Hey, I'm way past my time limit, but thank you for listening. Thank you for paying attention. Again, I'll attach all the information in the slides below. Thank you for watching. Have a great night.